Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Jamuna Tiravana Chari Jamuna Tiravana Chari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Vishnupad Paramahansa Parivrajakachaja Astatarasata Shri Śrīmad. His Divine Grace Abhaya Charanavinda Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki. Jaya Nitya Leela Pavishta Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Parivrajakachaja Astatarasata Shri Śrīmad. His Divine Grace Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Goswami Prabhupada Ki. Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki. Grantaraj Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam Ki. Go Premanandi. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Sri Guru, Sri Gauranga, and Srila Prabhupada. So reading from Srila Prabhupada Leelamrita, Volume 6, chapter titled, Chant Hare Krishna and Fight. Tomorrow, Krishna replaced Hansarupa as Srila Prabhupada's secretary. And early in the morning on Hansarupa's last day of duty, Srila Prabhupada called him in just after dictating his Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam verses and purports, and told him that for breakfast he wanted cucumber, soaked mung dal, and fruits. He said he had just dictated some verses and purports dealing with transmigration, and he rewound the tape and played back the dictation. Philosophical arguments of Krishna's father Vasudeva, trying to convince Kamsa about the eternality of the soul. Vasudeva argued that at death the soul changes from one body to another, just as a man walking down the street places one foot in front of the other. And Prabhupada, while listening, demonstrated by walking with two fingers across the dictating machine. Prabhupada's dictation continued. At the present moment, there is great opposition to the Hare Krishna movement, which is being called a brainwashing movement. But actually, the so-called scientists, philosophers, and other leaders in the Western countries have no brains at all. Right? We can see that now, right? Very clearly. The Hare Krishna movement is trying to elevate such foolish persons by enlightening their intelligence so that they will take advantage of the human body. Unfortunately, because of gross ignorance, they regard the Hare Krishna movement as a brainwashing movement. They do not know that without God consciousness, one is forced to continue transmigrating from one body to another. Now the very same arguments that Prabhupada had spoken to the sannyasis were immortalized in the Bhaktivedanta purports. In the future, after the court case had finished and mostly forgotten, Prabhupada's true assessment of the situation would prevail. On February 22nd, 350 devotees arrived on a Boeing 747 Air India jet at Dum Dum Airport in Calcutta. The special flight, all devotees had flown from Los Angeles to New York to London, picking up more devotees at each stop. As it was the first landing of a 747 in Calcutta, the mayor, local militia, leading Air India dignitaries, and media people were on hand to greet the historic flight. One of the devotees told the reporter that the Boeing 747s coming from the west to Calcutta was the mercy of Lord Chaitanya and Srila Prabhupada. 10 busloads of devotees then rode to Mayapur. Soon the Mayapur Chandradoya Mandir was teeming with transcendental activity. The Gaura Purnima festival was in full swing. The Vaikuntha Players of New York staged an evening theater performance of the Ramayana, and Srila Prabhupada attended. The audience watched and appreciated Srila Prabhupada almost as much as they did the play. You can see that. All eyes, Prabhupada was the cynosure of everyone's eye. On the opening night of the Pandal, a government minister attended to officially inaugurate the festivities. He cut a ribbon to open a new building, and he and Srila Prabhupada walked together down the long first-floor corridor and viewed a photo display of ISKCON centers around the world. Halfway down the corridor, Srila Prabhupada stopped, shook his head, and said, "It is all inconceivable." The minister was also amazed at the scale on which Srila Prabhupada was propagating Gaudiya Vaishnavism. Then Srila Prabhupada and his guests went onto the stage. The minister gave an introductory speech glorifying a well-known impersonalist Swami, referring to him as the divine incarnation. He also slighted the name of Lord Chaitanya by saying that although he didn't know whether Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was an incarnation, he knew he had certainly done good in the world. Srila Prabhupada spoke next. Using scriptural evidence to correct the erroneous opinions the minister had given in his talk, Srila Prabhupada spoke in Bengali, and most of his disciples could not understand, but they could appreciate the gist. Later, when Srila Prabhupada was sitting in his room with a few devotees, he began laughing, smacking his fist into his left palm, and said, "I have smashed him." With Gaura Purnima only about a week away, thousands of Bengali pilgrims were attending the ISKCON Center each night. They streamed into the temple room for kirtan and darshan of Radha Madhava, and then went to see the ISKCON photo exhibit. It was the biggest and best organized Mayapur festival ever. Despite the opposition in America, Lord Chaitanya's movement was flooding the world with the waves of Sankirtan, and this gathering of more than 500 devotees from every continent was a powerful testimony to the good health of the growing Krishna conscious movement. Actually, there were no Russians or Chinese at the time, so there was a few areas that were not represented. Rameswara Swami returned with the latest figures for Prabhupada's book production. In the English language alone, Srila Prabhupada had published 43,450,500 pieces of literature. So we read that again? 43,450,500 pieces of literature. And the total production of Srila Prabhupada's books in 22 languages, including Russian, was 55,314,000, more than 90% of which had already been distributed. Rameshwar also presented Srila Prabhupada with a new book, just off the press, 9th Canto, Part 1 of the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. Radha Ballabha reported that the next printing of Bhagavad Gita as it is would be so large that the paper required to print it would have to be carried on 76 train cars. Prabhupada and the devotees laughed at the astounding figures. Prabhupada thanked the devotees for their hard work. "This is the blessing of my Guru Maharaj," he said. He wanted it, and because we are trying to do this, he is giving us all his blessings. Srila Prabhupada ki. That was when they opened the Long Building, which at that time was the longest building in West Bengal. Prabhupada always went for some special dimension. So at that time, the longest building in West Bengal. Everyone's been to Mayapur, right? Devarshi, you've been to Mayapur? Not yet? You have to go see what was formerly the longest building in West Bengal. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Reading from the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, 3rd Canto, 5th Chapter, Text 47. Vidura's talks with Maitreya. Tatapare Chatma Samadhi Yoga. Tatapare Chatma Samadhi Yoga. Balena Jitva Prakriting Balishtam. Balena Jitva Prakriting Balishtam. Tvameva Dhirak Purushang Vishanti. Tvameva Dhirak Purushang Vishanti. Tesham Shamakshan Natu Sevayate. Tesham Shamakshan Natu Sevayate. Please chant. Tatapare Chatma Samadhi Yoga. Balena Jitva Prakriting Balishtam. Tvameva Dhira Purushang Vishanti. Teshang Shamakshana Tu Sevayate. Tatapare Chatma Samadhi Yoga. Tatapare Chatma Samadhi Yoga. Jitva Prakriting Balishtam. Tesham Shamakshana Tu Sevayate. Tatapare Chatma Samadhi Yoga. Malena Jitva Prakriting Balishtam. Hare Prasam Vashanti. Tesham Samakshana Tu Sevayate. Tatapare Chatma Samadhi Yoga. Malena Jitva Prakriting Balishtam. Tvame Vidarak Purushang Vishanti. Teshang Shamakshantu Evayate. Tata, as far as. Apare, others. Cha, also. Atma Samadhi, transcendental self-realization. Yoga means. Malena, by the strength of. Jitva, conquering. Prakritim, acquired nature or modes of nature. Balishtam, very powerful. Twang, you. Eva, only, dhira, pacified, purusham, person, vishanti, enters into, tesham, for them, shamak, much labor, shat, has to be taken, na, never, to, but, sevaya, by serving, te, of you. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Others who are pacified by means of transcendental self-realization and have conquered over the modes of nature by dint of strong power and knowledge also enter into you. But for them there is much pain, whereas the devotee simply discharges devotional service and thus feels no such pain. Please repeat. Others who are pacified by means of transcendental self-realization and have conquered over the modes of nature by dint of strong power and knowledge also enter into you. But for them there is much pain, whereas the devotee simply discharges devotional service and thus feels no such pain. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. In terms of a labor of love and its returns, the bhaktas, or devotees of the Lord, always have priority over persons who are addicted to the association of jnanis or impersonalists and yogis or mystics. The word apare, others, is very significant in this connection. Others refers to the jnanis and the yogis, whose only hope is to merge into the existence of the impersonal Brahma Jyoti. Although their destination is not so important in comparison to the destination of the devotees, the labor of the non-devotees is far greater than that of the bhaktas. One may suggest that there is sufficient labor for the devotees also in the matter of discharging devotional service, but that labor is compensated by the enhancement of transcendental pleasure. The devotees derive more transcendental pleasure while engaged continuously in the service of the Lord than when they have no such engagement. In the family combination of a man and a woman, there is much labor and responsibility for both of them. Yet when they are single, they feel more trouble for want of their united activities. The union of the impersonalists and the union of the devotees are not on a par. The impersonalists try to fully stop their individuality by attaining sayujya mukti, or unification by merging into oneness, whereas the devotees keep their individuality to exchange feelings in relationship with the Supreme Individual Lord. Such reciprocation of feelings takes place in the transcendental Vaikuntha planets, and therefore the liberation sought by the impersonalists is already achieved in devotional service. The devotees attain mukti automatically while continuing the transcendental pleasure of maintaining individuality. As explained in the previous verse, the destination of the devotees is Vaikuntha, or Akunta Disnya, the place where anxieties are completely eradicated. One should not mistake the destination of the devotees and that of the impersonalists to be one and the same. The destinations are distinctly different, and the transcendental pleasure derived by the devotee is also distinct from chinmatra, or spiritual feelings alone. Om Jnana Tamanandasya Gananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Amilitamina Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Mukam Karoti Vachalam Pangum Lankai Tegram Yakripatamam Bande Shri Gurum Dinatanam. Confirmed. So we'll read the verse again. Others who are pacified by means of transcendental self-realization and have conquered over the modes of nature by dint of strong power and knowledge, also enter into you, but for them there is much pain, whereas the devotee simply discharges the devotional service and thus feels no such pain. So sometimes we hear in the material affairs, when people are trying to complete some project, whatever it is, large or small, the key word, they call these words buzzwords. The key word is seamless transition. Just like a piece of cloth that has no seams. That means it's continuous. There's no break. It doesn't have to be stitched together. So when you're trying to do something, open a business, you want change management. It's a big thing. One company changes hands to another company, absorbed by, even appropriately, by merging. Right? A small company merges into a larger company, becomes amalgamated. It loses its original identity. But somewhere up at the top level, those who are in charge of this transaction, they want a seamless transition. In other words, there should be no disturbance. Everything should merge harmoniously. You're trying to bring two distinct companies together. They have different cultures. They have different methods of execution. So there's so many analogies like this. The impersonalists, they have no insight, and therefore they're not looking for something higher. This is the problem. Because of their narrow focus, sometimes it is called, what do they say? Tunnel vision, nearsightedness, myopic. They all mean the same thing. Very narrow focus. Not one pointed attention. Not focus on the proper action, but focused on a misconception. And so therefore they're not seeking anything greater. Like the thief in the pastime with Sanatana Goswami, looking for the touchstone. Right? What was the conclusion? The conclusion was, Sanatana Goswami said, take it. And the thief took it and realized that this is the reservoir of all wealth. So why did this sadhu give it up so easily? And in his mind he thought, well, he must have something much more valuable. So then he went back to Sanatana Goswami. And this is a thief. He's threatening. Said, I know you have something more valuable. And if you don't give it up, what do thieves do? They'll kill you. They threaten. But Sanatana Goswami, he tricked him. What did he do? He said, yes, I have something much more valuable. He said, then I want it. He said, okay, well, first you have to throw that touchstone away into some irretrievable location, a very deep kund. So once he throws it, he's not getting it back. But somehow or other, he had faith in the words of Sanatana Goswami. And when he went back, Sanatana Goswami said, no, yes, I have the most valuable thing. And what is that? Love of God. Prema Pumartha Mahan, the ultimate goal. But the impersonals, they don't know. So therefore, they're not seeking it. They're looking for this touchstone, material pleasure in the material world. Always going from one situation to another, never satisfied, always frustrated. And you can see it on their faces. When we're in the subway, riding to Sankirtan, you look at all these not happy faces. And they're all self-absorbed. They have their headphones in. And they're all in their own little worlds. It's as if they're writing or executing all these activities in a vacuum, all by themselves. No relations, no socialization. This is real impersonalism. And so no wonder they have bad experience. They don't want a God who's a person, where I might have some obligation, some need for reciprocation, where I have to go out of my way and neglect my sense gratification once a week. Can you imagine? Just once a week. I used to fight my mother, drag us to church every Sunday. Why? Because there's no ruchi, there's no taste. Who wants to go and just sit there? There's nothing. It was a terrible experience. But you do it because, this is your parents, they're trying to bring you along in this regard. But I knew from the very beginning that this is, what is it? If this is what religion is, I don't want any part of it. I don't want any part of it. No higher taste. There was much more taste outside the walls of the church. Everyone knew that. Sense gratification everywhere. There was no comparison. Nothing. And they tried to spice it up a little bit. I remember back in the 60s, they started having youth mass. You didn't go to the upstairs where the adults were all chanting. You went downstairs, and you had a young priest, and he's playing a guitar, and they would do some, it was also not very satisfying. We were getting more so-called taste from the prevailing culture of music. And so religion got left in the wayside until we came in contact with Lord Chaitanya's representatives. And then you saw how are these people so happy? When you saw them chanting in the street, or you saw them chanting in the park, you wondered, how can these people be so happy? What is the secret? Of course, you're thinking some nefarious thing. It must be some intoxication, must be something, some hypnosis. What could it be? It can't be very intelligent. All the pleasures here, outside in the park, and they're all. But, hindsight being 20/20, I wished I had taken it seriously when I first saw them. But, this is Krishna's arrangement. If you're not ready, you're not ready. Right? And that's described in the Gita, that from whichever point you left in a previous, birth, due to your, agyata sukriti, or execution of devotional service, then from that point you take it up again. And it's pretty much exactly the way it happens. All of a sudden you read Bhagavad Gita and it's like waking up from a dream. You realize, how is that possible? That I'm reading this, I've never been in contact with this type of philosophy before. How is it that everything makes perfect sense? I sat in church for years. I read the Bible for years. I read the Tao Te Ching. I read the sutras of Patanjali. Nothing had any impact. But as soon as we read Bhagavad Gita, immediately we were intrigued, and we couldn't ignore the philosophy, the realization, even at that nascent neophyte stage. So profound. Never was there a time when I did not exist, nor you, nor all these kings, nor in the future shall we ever cease to be. Who talks like that? Where can you hear such things? For the soul is never birth nor death, nor having once been does he ever cease to be. Unborn, eternal, ever existing, primeval, and not slain when the body is slain. I was like, this is amazing. But I was it was also a little bit intimidating, because it meant that now, what else is it going to say in here? And of course, there it is. Sarvadaman pritya jamame kamasharam bhaja amatvam sarvam papebhyo moksha saimasachahai. That was it. Abandon all varieties of religion and just surrender unto me. I will deliver you from all sinful reaction. Do not fear. So that was, I realized I couldn't escape. I had no excuses left why I should not take this philosophy more seriously. Krishna had somehow or other, even in his dull stone, of a material heart, jaded by cheaters for years, we saw so many bogus yogis all come to simply snatch followers and dollars. We had a name, Snatcher the Dollar, the Integral Yoga Studio. I didn't coin that name, Srila Prabhupada, Snatcher the Dollar. Very famous bogus yogi. Very popular. But it was obvious to those of us who were, trying to be serious about spiritual life that this is all just, these people weren't, you saw the followers and you could tell that these people, they're not serious. So how serious can the philosophy be? But when I met the devotees, every single devotee was completely focused. Completely focused on the absolute truth. No deviation from one conviction to another. Didn't matter who you spoke to. The young devotees, the older devotees, the men, the women. They all had exactly the same realizations. And realizations, not just mere parroting of some shlokas, but you could see that by their actions and how they performed devotional service with genuine love. We have a low battery? So this is something we want to bring now again. For some time, the preaching in New York was lapsed. That's an old history. We don't have to go into it. But the point is that this is a new beginning, in a sense that we have all the facility. And along with facility comes responsibility. Prabhupada said responsibility means facility, but facility also means responsibility. We have to take the mission seriously. That our duty is to propagate the chanting of the holy names and the distribution of transcendental literature. We have no other. We're not here to, give some classes on yoga, or, anything else. These things are all secondary. They're not meant for frontline preachers. We have the best. We have everything. And what is it? Miserly, kripana. If we don't distribute, if we're thinking, okay, I've got this philosophy, I'm satisfied, but I don't want to share it. And what is the point? Someone who has something good, he always wants to distribute it. Matter of fact, that's what got us into trouble in the early days when we were very young, and the word was zealot. Zealot means almost fanatical. They use that term pejoratively, negatively. The connotation is not positive. But a zealot is one who is completely convinced and he's ready to get in your face and tell you. And so we used to do that to our relatives, to our parents, to our friends. And of course, all those friends and relatives, they just distanced themselves from us, which was also Krishna's mercy. It was meant to be. They were no longer, we weren't speaking the same language anymore. We're talking about, transcendental science or self-realization, and they're talking about the next rock concert, the best drug to get, You realize very quickly what the difference in the modes of nature is. And we're reading it in the Bhagavad Gita, and you see it play out right in front of you. Right in front of you. So everything Krishna you opened the book and Krishna just brought it to life. And he opened your eyes, opened Jnana Tamandasya. That was so clear. Aham Ajnana Jamtam. I was just completely, just like somebody turned on the light. Boom, like Prabhupada says. When the sun comes up, everything is clear. And in the darkness, everyone is afraid. So we have to bring that light to the people in general in this dark age of Kali Yuga. This is very important. For everything else that goes on, obviously we have a lot to do to maintain, Radha Govinda's temple, and it can't be neglected. But you always have to keep in mind that this is only for preaching. This building is only for preaching. It's not a comfortable place to live. It's only for preaching. And we have to do the needful, to somehow or other, bring that glory back to Radha Govinda and Srila Prabhupada. That New York is his most important project. His most important project. So we have to treat it as such. That should be always in the forefront of our consciousness. That this is not just an ordinary temple. Everyone knows now. 4 international projects. 4. Used to be Mayapur, Vrindavan, and Bombay. But now it's New York, Vrindavan, Mayapur, and Bombay. New York is first. Why first? Because it's the oldest. So we have a great responsibility, and we should take it seriously. And we should be grateful that we've been offered this opportunity. There should be lines at all the airports in the world for people to get on a 747 to come to New York. Like the 747 that went to India full. Should be lines of people coming. I want to serve at Radha Govinda Mandir. I want to serve in Prabhupada's original, So this is, we're running out of battery power here. We'll have to remember to bring of course we can't. You have to have a splitter, and then we can plug in a separate power source. So remind not to borrow to get a power splitter next time. And this way we can plug in a charger. It might even have 2 ports on the bottom. And then you can use one of those battery extenders to simultaneously power the phone and go into the soundboard. So we'll take some questions because it's running out of juice. Huh? I can't hear you. If I have a cable, I don't have a cable. We were just telling not to, but we need to be able to put in a battery, extra battery for the times when someone forgot to plug this in. You have it, but then you have to have the battery power or power. We do. We're juiced. We're out. Nobody, either somebody left it on. How much? 17%. Okay, turn the brightness down. We're good. So, questions? Yes, Prabhu. Tulsi, spelled with U-L-S-I. Just remember that. I keep telling them. Say that one more time, Prabhu. Well, Prabhupada wasn't in this building. That is a recreation of Prabhupada's room on Henry Street, which is 1 mile down the road. We had a temple, 439 Henry Street, the intersection of Henry and Kane. And so, if you look at the picture above Prabhupada, that was his room where he would translate. Very nice room in the back, overlooking the garden, the backyard. And he translated many well, we know for what we were there, what he was translating, different, everything he was working on at the time. So this is 1970. When I was there, it was 1975. I had come in 74 after Prabhupada had left. And then he came again in March of 1975. And we could hear him, the dictaphone, go on and off as he would be translating. So that's that scene, Prabhupada translating into his desk, his original desk, sitting on his original seat with all of his original desk paraphernalia. So it's a very special, we have, and it's, of course, Prabhupada's shoes, original shoes. We meditate on the lotus feet of Radha Govinda. And then at the same time, the sincere disciple, he's very much attached to the lotus feet of the spiritual master. He doesn't have I can only speak for myself. My attachment to Radha Govinda's lotus feet is, to the extent that my small mind and heart can accommodate. There's not very much. But I can be firmly attached to the lotus feet of my spiritual master because I've had that service and I've tasted that. So therefore, it is tangible. So there's, and reading from Prabhupada's Lilamrita, Satsvarupa Maharaj has done this service, and anyone who reads these books gets some understanding of who that great personality was or is. There's not, it's unique. People try to say, oh, this person was great, he did this, he did this. There's no one that compares to Srila Prabhupada in this world. Now or in recent history. Prabhupada said he was fortunate that they let him do this service. He doesn't take the credit. At the same time, he says, they let me do this, seemingly, and get the credit. But Prabhupada was never under any other impression other than that this is the mercy of my spiritual master. And that should also be our mentality. Yes, Nri Keshari, Prabhu. Well, to encourage them to engage in some aspect of the purificatory process, chant Hare Krishna. I can't say 100% for sure, but, there's we see that there's that those who come to the temple and they have that attitude that they're seeking, tadvidi pranipatena pariprasthena sevya. They're not challenging. I'd already met the devotees, and I was impressed by their command of philosophy. They weren't just talking, Krishna is God like that. No, the discussion begins from your spirit soul. You're not this body, and that concept, I could relate to that concept in the sense that the analogies they used were very clear. Your boyhood to youth to old age. So many changes, it's the same. And then when they were saying these things, it was making perfect sense. I had no reference point in any other philosophy in regards to that. There are some philosophies that talk about out-of-body experiences, but nothing concrete, nothing that said, well, why is that out-of-body experience unique? What does it imply? And of course, it implies that I'm different from the body. If I have an out-of-body experience, obviously I'm not the body, but people couldn't put the two things together. And somehow or other, the devotees, in the same way, they were explaining it very convincingly. you can say, because they were convinced. They'd already experienced that pratyaksha vagamam dharmyam, that the perfection of religion. Why is it the perfection? Because it is practically realized through execution. When you execute devotional service, Krishna is within the heart. Sarva Sichaham Riddhisani Visto. This knowledge is coming, and I understood that this is, I don't know where this knowledge is coming from. Maybe it was there, maybe it wasn't. I mean, I read I'm reading Bhagavad Gita, and I could understand it. Yes. How can I have any access to knowledge which I'd never previously been exposed to? I didn't read anything about this in college. Transmigration of the soul, the three modes of material nature, the divine and divine. There was nothing like this. And then reading Bhagavad Gita, somehow or other I was understanding. And I realized this is not because I have any qualification, but somehow or other there was I don't know how you want to call it. I mean, there's just Guru's grace. That has to be there somehow or other. Not being inimical, just interacting with the devotees, in a humble, submissive way. This is when we invite guests in, we should be able to recreate that exchange. Krishna and Arjuna are on the battlefield. This discussion is eternal. And so the questions and the answers are the same, and we have them right here. And so when they come in with their questions, it's the same questions. Who am I? Who is God? What is our relationship? We have the answers. We're the only ones that have the answers. Nobody else has these answers. They think they have the answers. But then as you begin to progress, you realize it's nothing. They don't know who God is. They don't know what he looks like. They don't know what the different relationships are. How can I approach him? How can I develop my love, from them? They're completely, we have to say ignorant. Not in a negative way, but it's just a fact. So we want to be compassionate and show them that there is a higher truth, beyond the religious principles that they may have been in contact with their whole life, just like I was. I was never so-called indoctrinated, because I never really took it seriously. But at the same time, that's the case with most people. They're either indoctrinated because of the culture that they are led to believe that they have to act like this, or they'll be ostracized or worse. There's just, you read these horrible things. Poor girl, married without her parents' permission, dragged out of her house by her mother and her brother, and the brother cut her head off and then took a selfie with it. So, this is not the culture, that we find that's an elevated religious understanding, right? But this is what we're up against. We're up against this type of fanaticism. And so the only thing we can do is to be genuine, not to be pretenders, to speak according to our realization, not, talk about the Gopi Bhava Club, Although people want, they think that we're neophytes because of that. I hear this all the time when I'm in India and Vrindavan. They say, oh, you've been in association with Krishna consciousness for 50 years and, you're not, you don't know what your Siddhadeha is? I mean, come on, get with the program. Come to my guru. He'll tell you tomorrow. But this is of no interest to us. It's of interest to us to understand our relationship with Krishna. But we're not anxious for something based on some subtle sense gratification. Because that's what they're doing. They're simply transferring their gross sense gratification to some subtle sense gratification. And they go through this mental gymnastics where they, what is that? Ariya krishena padang padang tata pasanti swaya. They simply fall down again. They can't last. They can't. The platform for them is, they can never be on that platform. But they can only think that way. Harava bhaktasya kuto mahaguna, manoraten asiti daivatobihi. Hovering on the mental platform. I love that verse. Hovering on the mental platform. You can just imagine a helicopter. Only a helicopter can hover, or a drone, same thing. And they're just there, but they can't go anyplace else. They're stuck, limited by their misconceptions. Atmavan manyate jagat. Do you know that verse? Devarashi doesn't know that verse. One sees things through his own mind. Basically, he thinks like everyone else, essentially, or that, whatever I see is correct. The universe according to Arjuna Ananda. Didn't they have a movie like that? Universe according to somebody? Something. That's what people think. People think it's whatever I think. Yatama tatafa. Whatever I see, that's reality. So they're all bewildered. Except for the few members of the Krishna Consciousness Society, we're trying to do our best to pay it forward. We're not here just, now that we've found this, let me hold on to it, eat all the Mahaprasadam, and just, No, those are the side benefits. There's no question about it. Those are definitely the side benefits. Nobody else can get, kheer, cooked with love and devotion. There's a taste, a supreme taste. We would scheme for that kheer, touched by the lips of Radha Govinda. So nothing sweeter, touched by the lips of Radha Govinda. And you drank that kheer, you knew that you were in the spiritual world, in Vaikuntha. And it always tastes better when you steal it. Mahaprasadam. Any other questions? Rikeshri? I'm eager to, because I know Rikeshri he's a big book distributor. He's covered over with, they have to reveal his flame, his fire, so that he'll go out there and just burn up the streets. And it's a special gift all the devotees have. They don't know it, so they don't use it. That when they come in contact with these fallen conditioned souls, that Krishna is giving them the special potency because they're engaged in this transcendental para upakara, the highest activity. The highest activity. Any other questions? Devarashi, no question? Sure? Arjuna, no question? Sure? Okay. Natabaji? Yes, Krishna Kripa. Do it. Well, that's it. Krishna was reciprocating. I thought you were going to say the guy came out of the shop and gave you money to move.
Even if no one likes it, Krishna still likes it.
Yeah, but that's it. That's always the case. Our duty is to please Krishna. And when you please Krishna, the whole world is pleased. Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam ki. Śrīla Prabhupada.